we are going to factor two things that multiply to 9 and add to negative 10 would be what?
Minus 9 minus 1.
Yes, negative 9 and negative 1. And then instead of putting x's here, we're going to put x squareds here so that they multiply to x to the fourth and then they add to this guy. All right, so then you're going to take those two factors and set them equal to 0. Both of these are differences of squares, so they're going to factor again. So this factors again, we just did this one. This is x plus 3 and x minus 3. What's this one?
X plus 1, x minus 1?
Yes. Okay. Then you set each one of those equal to 0.
Yeah.
So here we get negative 3 and 3. And here we get negative 1 and 1. So you have 4 total answers.
You did so many steps.
I do. This is algebra 2. I got to do all the steps. Okay. And then if you want to check it, you just take these, plug them back into the original, and you should get like 0 on the left, and then it's equal to 0. Okay.
Minus 1.
So this changes
X cubed plus 1.
when you factor, instead of putting x's here or x squareds here, you're putting whatever's in the middle. So you're going to put x cubed and x cubed here.
And then it's minus 1.
Yes, so two numbers that multiply to positive 1 and add to negative 2, those are going to be two negative 1s. So x cubed minus 1 and x cubed minus 1. So you'll see both of those factors are like the same thing, right? So you would take each them each individually, you'd set them equal to 0. Since they're both the exact same thing, I'm just going to take one of them and set it equal to 0. I don't need to do it twice. Okay. Now, this is not a difference of squares, but it is a difference of cubes. So that's one of your vocab words. Make sure you know the difference of cubes and make sure you know how to factor them. Okay, so you factor, you have to know which one like A and B is. So you're going to cube root each of these guys. So the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of 1 is 1. So you're plugging that into your difference of cubes kind of technique. So you're going to get x minus 1, so same, and then opposite, always positive when you factor. Now when you use this factoring technique, you're going to get one real solution. So that'll come from the binomial. So the binomial is going to be like the one real solution. The quadratic that you get after you factor, there won't be any real solutions to this. So no real solutions. Which in the past you would just put like no solution for these, but one of the things that we're doing differently in this chapter is talking about imaginary solutions. So hopefully you guys watched that video when I was sick. Did you watch the video? Okay, if you didn't watch, there were a couple videos. If you didn't watch videos, you need to make sure you watch the videos before next week, otherwise it's not going to make any sense. So they talked about imaginary numbers. Imaginary numbers come from square roots of negative things. Basically what we would do in order to solve this, we wouldn't be able to factor it because it's not a real solution, which means you can't factor it. We would have to either use the quadratic formula or complete the square. So I don't want to do completing the square because that takes a long time to explain, and we're going to do that next week, but you guys should kind of know the quadratic formula, right? A little bit on the poster. So we have x equals negative b. So b is the number in front of the linear term. So in this case 1. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4. And then a is in front of the x squared. A, and then this is c. All over 2a. When you simplify, simplify from the inside out and then top to bottom. So negative 1 plus or minus the square root of, this is 1 minus 4, so that's negative 3 over 2. And then because this is the square root of a -3, it's like the square root of -1 times the square root of 3. If you look at it as two different square roots. The square root of -1 is,
It's imaginary.
it's I,
What?
specifically. So I squared is -1. The square root of -1 is I. So we're going to rewrite this as -1 plus or minus I times the square root of 3 over 2. Because this is I. And those would be your other, there's two here. -1 plus I root 3 over 2 and -1 minus I root 3 over 2. Those are the other two solutions that you get.
So confused.
About the quadratic formula?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my god.
I'm going to write it over here.
It's gonna be on a test.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die.
You've never seen this before?
No.
You're going to be fine. We're going to go over it more next week.
Anything we do is on the test.
So the number, look, the number in front of the x squared, that is called a. The number in front of the x, that is called b. The number in front of the nothing is the c. Okay.
Just that it's too much.
Modifying it for an equation. So this is a difference of squares that factors more than once. So kind of like what we were just doing. So first, you would factor this like a regular difference of squares. So what is the square root of 625x to the fourth? Any guesses? Something x squared.
Something x squared.
What's the square root of 625? 25. So 25x squared. And square root of 1? 1. So you're going to have plus 1, minus 1. So that's how it would factor. Now, what you're left with, can you factor this?
Yes.
2?
No.
No. Can't factor this. Can you factor this?
No.
Yes.
Why?
Because it's another difference of squares. It factors to 5x plus 1 and 5x minus 1. This one doesn't factor again because it's a sum of squares and that's not a thing.
Okay. Oh, wow. I was about to ask you.
So then we have 1, 2, 3. We're going to set each of these equal to 0. So 25x squared plus 1, set that equal to 0. 5x plus 1, set that equal to 0. 5x minus 1, and set that equal to 0. All right, so let's do these two first. These are easy. We're going to subtract 1. We get 5x equals -1, and then divide. You get -1/5. Over here we would add 1,
It's just positive.
so you get +1/5. So those are two real solutions. They're real and they're rational. Over here, a little different. So you subtract your 1, divide by 25. Okay, and then how do you undo a squared?
Square root. But
Square
you
root.
Can't square root negative.
So this isn't going to be a real answer, but we're going to get an imaginary answer. Okay, so you're going to square root, square root, square root. Now when you use the square root property like this, you square root both sides, you have to make sure you do plus or minus. So what is the square root of just regular 1/25?
It is
What's square root of 1?
1.
And then the square root of 25 is, so 1/5 would be the square root of 1/25. So that's what our answer would be. But since it's a negative 1/25, it's going to be 1/5 I,
So
the
you
imaginary unit.
So you put I if it's negative?
Anytime you take the square root of a negative number, you're going to put an I. That's the only difference.